Good evening from Area 51 Raceway. So, as promised, I'm going to talk about the Beach Racer Challenge series and making a chassis for that Beach Racer Challenge series. So, my car that I picked up when I went to Hobby Lobby this evening, and I couldn't find an old Plymouth or 40s Ford. So, the only thing they had was a 57 and a 55, and so I decided to go with the 55. Basically, I call this a shoebox car. I'm sure everybody has heard that term. That's what it is, a shoebox car. And this is the model right here. So I'm using this as an example when you build a chassis, and when you build a chassis for a body, what you want to do is get, the width of your wheelbase from the the inside of the wheel well. You want to get your length right. So before we start with that, I'm going to talk about just the pieces you will need to start a chassis. The type of chassis that I'll build, I'll be using these as the frame rails, and this is K&S 8264, as you can see there on, excuse me, if you can see there right there. Let me move the light a little more, forgive me, I don't have much. So there's what you need. 8264 rectangle brass tube. It's an 1/8 by 1/4 by 14 thousandths. I think that's the thickness is what they're talking about. In millimeters, it's 3.118 millimeters by 6.35 millimeters. So this will be the frame rails. For the axle, or the axle tube, it'll be K&S round brass stock, or round brass tube, excuse me, 8130, and that's 7/32 by 14 thousandths. In millimeters, it's 5.56. Now, as for the guide, you could use what's called a Cobra guide, which you could get through Professor Motor, or you could make your own guide. There's two ways of doing it, and it depends what kind of guide you want to use. If you make your guide, which you can make from the 8264, but you would need to get the 8129 tubing, which is 3/16 by 14 by 14 thickness. It's 4.76 millimeter. And what that's going to do, that's going to give you this size that this guide will fit into, so you could so it'll swivel inside. So if you wanted to use the Slotting Plus guide, which is this one right here, which are good guides, these are universal, deep wood guides, very easy to use, and they work really well. I wasn't a fan of them at first, but I've actually grown to like them. And then if you stick with the Cobra one that I talked about, the guide tongue, then you would use a commercial, basically it's for a commercial guide, just like that, and those are fairly available anywhere. Sot Car Corner, they got a bunch of them. So, as the rules go, you'll be using the CB design wheels. They make a 3/32 axle and a 1/8 axle, so you could go with either one. If you go with 1/8 axle, you'll use 1/8 bushings. If you go with 3/32 axle, you use 3/32 bushings. The bushings are available through Sot Car Corner. I'll post, part numbers and stuff in this video below it, and to help you guide you through everything. Now the wheel selections are Paul gauge 26/125. So you got 26 millimeters, right? By 12, and then you have 28 millimeters by 12. So you could see the wheel difference, or the tire difference, the size right there. So you could go either one, or do the front like this or the rear like this if you want to rake. But you got to make sure when you set your guide that you're careful, because you know that the front wheels will be a little bit lower. So you got to be a little bit more just involved looking at it and making sure it's right. But you could go with either both these size all the way around, or the smaller ones. And I'm just showing these as an example. These wheels here are CB design 3/32 wheels, and I will leave part numbers in the link so you can see them. Now for the axles, this is the Slotting Plus 3/32 axle. This is 65 millimeter by 2.38 millimeters. So I prefer the longer ones, only mainly because it's better to have more than less, as I was taught, because you could always lop off the extra. So if by somehow design you want to add shims and you need more axle spacing to go outward, it's nice to have the extra stuff, and then you could size up that way. And that's what I will use for this build in particular, which will be, I'll be going with a 3/32. Now, other parts that are available too are the, excuse me, wrong drawer, are the slotted gears. For the Home Racing World headquarters track, 927 is the best gearing to use, in my opinion. You could use another gearing if you want. It is allowed. It's up to you. There's different kinds you can choose from. But what I've seen has worked best is 927. If you want to experiment with the pinion gear, you can. There is a gearing chart that Sot Car Corner does offer. And it tells you the gearing, basically what's what. I have a small card here and I don't know where it is, but it will tell you, you know, what gear ratio you get if you get 9, you know, 27, 8, 20, you know, 20, 28, or whatever you want to, you know, mess around with. So here's basically what you have is what you need here, at least to start. I'll do more videos and kind of go more into other things. Now for the chassis, and I have one on the pegboard already, or the jeweler's block as they call it, soldering block, and I'll explain as I go here. So here's what I have right here. This is pretty much would be a basic chassis you would put together if you want to do a beach racer, you know, something simple for you for the beach racer challenge. And I'll explain that this is cut, you know, in half. You get a piece of the 8264 and you just cut it in half. You know, if you're off a little, don't you know, kill yourself over it. And what you're gonna do is when you get your jeweler's board, you kind of mark the center line. This right here is actually would be like, to me, the front of the car where I have it marked. And these little dots are the wheel spacing. So as you can see, this is lined up with that as best it could. And kind of give me an idea where the front wheels would go in relation to the rear wheels. Now, as you can see, I got my body here, and I'm gonna put it over here. And I'm gonna just do this, just to pull it out. I don't know if you can see that. You can see where my rear wheels would be in relation to the front of the car. And you kind of look at where the guide would be also. You kind of would want the guide tucked in more than that is, because otherwise it'll interfere with the bumper or something. So then you could always slide this guide back and it'll give you an idea where it would set at. And you could position it that way. Now what I've done here also is, this is the Cobra guide. I've used brass here to kind of center it on there, and this is brass 8161. I don't have a package of it because I'm currently out. This was the last strip I had. I have to get more. 861 is a common one for the 3/32 chassis builds, the stinker build, the stinker chassis build. That's the common frame rail size for 3/32 that people will use, or they use wire or whatever they want to do it. There's different ways to do a chassis. You could experiment how you build them. I've done wire, I've done this, I've done different things, and I still want to experiment with other people's ideas too, because when you see other people's chassis, you kind of get an idea if you want to mimic that chassis or make something close to it. And this is what's nice about this. You could always design something later on. This is just something basically I'm having doing this so you could kind of get a basic idea to do one for a functional slot car. So the 8161, which is the, I forget the size because I don't have it in front of me, and forgive me. I don't, actually, it's not 8161, excuse me. That is brass rod. Now I cannot remember the number. I'll have to put it in the link. I apologize. I think it's 8162, I think it is. I think that's what it is, but I could be wrong, but I will double check. So these pieces are, I don't remember the size, or in the narrow channels, and I put them in between here to kind of tighten this up to center it. And then what you could do is solder these, and then if you position it and you have some more hanging over, you could always lop these off with a die grinder and you'll be fine. But this is basically a chassis right here, and I haven't done anything to this. It's just put on there to show you an example. because I haven't even put the axle tube up, and I'll go into that in a sec here. So this would be the chassis itself, and then you would put your body pans here, and we'll get into that later on, and you know, more videos on putting your body mounts. But this is basically how you would kind of see it as, and you would have your axle tubing here as well. So now that we have that part done, I'm going to take this all apart here, move these out of the way, and remove all this right out of there. So when you start, you're going to start with, oh, I'm sorry, forgive me, your motor bracket would be a JK motor bracket. And again, I'll put the links of the parts which you need. So this is a JK motor bracket. It would be a JK D3 motor bracket. That's what this is. So I'll take this out. So when checking these, and Harry has talked about this, you want to make sure these are true. And there's a way to check them, and he did a video on this, on how to check these to make sure they're, you know, because sometimes manufacturing, they have a little problem, or one may get away where they just don't, you know, come out right. So you want to double check it. So when you do that, you want to slide your 8130 tubing, like a long piece. You want to make sure that it's pretty much level. As you can see there. If it's like crooked or it's off, then you'll have a problem, and you could check it like this also to see that it's, you know, perpendicular and not crooked or anything like that. So if you can see that. That's the first thing you would want to do, just to make sure your bracket's good. And then if it's not, you know, return it and get a new one. Sot Car Corner's got great customer service. We'll take care of you, because, I mean, sometimes things do go a little wrong, and it's, you know, it happens. Pretty much these holes should be pretty lined up. You could check that also. You just eyeball it. Obviously, if you see something way off, then there's something wrong with the bracket. Return it and get another one. So here's the 8130. And what I've done, usually I cut them to about 4 millimeters. And there was a gentleman who commented on my measurements one time. So 4 millimeters, because I'm going by this where it says millimeters, so it's about 4. So that's the width of the axle itself. And I'll show you how I do that. I get my bushings and my axle, and I put it here and here. And what I do is I get my wheels. I'll use the fat wheels. And what I'm going to do is lock these down, because if you don't lock these down, it may fly off, and then your bushing goes flying off like it did earlier for me, and I had to go search through it in the carpet here where I'm at, and that's kind of a tedious thing to do. So I'm going to lock them in place so that doesn't happen again. And I just get my little, you know, Allen head tool and just a little tug there, don't go too crazy. And this is the wheel basically, you know, it's the width of the wheels. And what I do is I get the body. This is the first thing I do before I put the chassis together, put this together. I kind of want to see where it's going to line up. Now, that's got some gap in there, which is fine. You can make it a little longer, but if, or wider, excuse me, but if you do, you don't want to hit the inside of your fender well. And then you could always, when these do get true down, they will come down a little. But I stick with 4 as a kind of like a basic. I've done it with most of my cars, mods and other stuff. There are some cars that may have a narrower body that I will shorten, that will make it narrower so to fit in there. But here's the nice part. So if you're not happy with the way the way they look, you could always add shims and shim them out a little. And you want to make the same size for the front as well. So as you can see there, that's pretty good right there. You know, all this stuff you could trim off when you before you put the body on, obviously, which I'll have to do to this. This is just part of the model. I'll probably cut some of the, you know, cut most of this off, because I'm gonna have a hood. I'm not gonna have an exposed engine. But hey, if you're gonna do an exposed engine, then go for it. I mean, you know, if you want to have the hood come off of the engine, that'd be pretty cool too. But I'm just showing you basically what I would do there, and I would usually cut that off. Or trim it, because it will interfere eventually, you know, how you build it. But I'm just showing you, you know, basically what I would do. Getting an engine detailing is just a little bit more work, but not saying not to do it, but you'll have to do more, how would you say, making sure the wheels don't rub on anything. And this will have to be cut a little, obviously, so you could see this stuff will interfere, and then when the car moves, you want to make sure it doesn't whack it. But you know, even if you get it assembled, and again, you could go with the smaller 26 tires, which are a little bit, you know, smaller. That'll work too if you want to do it that way. Go smaller wheel or smaller tire in the front. So that's the width. That's what I usually do first. So now I got the width correct. So I could take these off right here, like so. Set them off to the side. Oh, the parts everywhere here, right? And then I'm gonna get my axle tube, and what I'm gonna do is I'll just clean it up a little bit with some, you know, you could use real fine sandpaper or this what you call this damn stuff? It's kind of like little emery, not emery, but oh, I can't remember what you call this stuff, but it's kind of like a little Scotch-Brite pad. There you go, Scotch-Brite. I couldn't think of it. And kind of clean it up, clean your part a little. The flux that you use, the Stay Clean flux, there, the acid flux, will clean as it solders on. So you have this piece, and what you're gonna do is slide it in there, and you got a little resistance there. Now I know Harry talked about this, and if you have a little wiggle room in there, it's not a bad idea. So I usually have a drill bit that's the exact size of this, and let me double check this, and that's this drill bit right here, and I usually get it and kind of do a little cleaning. If you have a file, and this size is a 7/32, basically, these holes here. So if you have a file at 7/32, you could run it through like that, or get a little drill bit, just don't go crazy, and kind of clean off like that, and then check it to see how it fits. It's a little tight, but it's nice to have a little bit more looseness than that, you know, or you could leave it a little tight. You just don't want it super tight. You just want to be able to, you know, nice and easy through there. That probably needs a little bit more work, but so basically gonna slide the axle in, and that's not too bad right there. So I mean, I could probably find, you know, get a little bit more room, work it out a little bit. It's pretty decent there. You kind of want a little bit to move, just a teeny bit, like Harry says, because he's done it. I need to get a file, 7/32 file, in order to make this work a little better. But I mean, it's not the end of the world if you don't get it, like, you know, with a little movement. It's just a preference he has. So, and when you have your axle in there, you're gonna set it in there, and what you're gonna do is make sure it's even as you can get it. You know, you could use a measuring tool, or you could use a caliper, which I have there. There's a bunch of stuff in there right now. Caliper is really nice to have. They're really cheap from Amazon. They don't cost that much. I would recommend a caliper. I would always recommend a caliper to have it, to make sure you're square everywhere. So that's pretty much the start of this, and I just wanted to go through this briefly. This is a, you know, first step is, you know, talking about parts, cutting your size for your axle, your width, what body you use. Depending on what body you use is what you go by. Some bodies may be narrower or wider, totally up to you. And I discussed the different size tires as well, and the pieces that you will use. I'll leave all the links on the video so you can see all the parts that you need. And again, here are the bushings, and again, they fit in the tube like that. 730, I think these are 7/32. I can't remember, but these are all available from Sot Car Corner. I will leave part links so you can know what to get. And if you want to build a chassis, you're welcome to build a chassis. And if you don't, you could use the H&R chassis, which is, you know, available, and which is allowed in the proxy. And then you could concentrate more on your body if you want. If you're more of a body guy, I mean, there's different options. Scratch building is really not difficult. A lot of people are intimidated by it. It's really, really easy. I mean, I could give you plenty of examples that I have lying around here. I think I got a bunch of cars, you know, that I'm doing in it, and it's just a lot. I mean, here's an example of one. This is a mod chassis, and I mean, I just primered this, and I got to paint it. But I mean, this one's a little bit more involved because I actually bend the brass pieces to make it look like mimic a chassis. So this is a little bit more advanced, but it's not impossible. I've only been doing this for a little over 2 years, so I'm not no expert. There are other people that know a lot more than I do, but I mean, if I could do this, I mean, you could do this. And if you could do a simple chassis like this, or if I could do a simple chassis like this, so can you. Not difficult. So that's it from Area 51 Raceway. Oh, one more thing actually before I go. So when I talked about doing the Slotting Plus guide, here's an example. This chassis is something I put together for a small car. Now you can see the 8129, and then if you use the 8264, what you do is you drill a small pilot hole, small one, and then you drill the size of this 8129, which is a 3/16 drill bit, and you just kind of make the hole so you could slide the 8129 into the brass piece. And this is what happens, this is how you get a guide right here. And this is for the slotting guide. And as you can see, you could make your guide right there for this particular one if you want to go to a deep wood Slotting Plus guide. But if you want to stick with, you know, the commercial one, there's the Cobra guide tongue, and I believe there's other ones from Professor Motor that you could buy also. These ones I like. They're pretty cool. I like how they work. But also making your own guide tongue, you could do that with the Slotting Plus with the 8264 and the 8129 brass tubing. That will be exact fit for this right here. So I just wanted to let you know about that first before we ended the video here. So anyways, that's it from Area 51 Raceway. I hope this kind of helps you out to start. I'll solder tomorrow the axle onto the bracket, so you could see that also. I've done videos on that before. I'll do one of that, and so you can see how we do it, you know, put it together. And that's it. I hope this has been enjoyable for you, and you guys take care and have fun racing.